Our journeyman quest to win a Champions League with a team that's never even been in a European final began in earnest as we found ourselves in charge of quite possibly one of the worst teams in Europe. For those that missed the introduction video, I will link that in the description, but for now, let's get rid of my face and get into the story. After 2 months of searching around for the perfect and most challenging job to kick things off, we settled on Marisca Mersch of the Luxembourg top flight, because they found themselves in an almost impossible league position. Winless through their first 14 games of the season, bottom of the table with just 5 points, and 12 points from safety with 16 games to go. I mean, seriously though, how can you be that far behind after half a season? What are you doing? A basically impossible challenge, but there's no point in taking easy jobs here because, quite frankly, where's the fun in that? Initially, I wondered if they were just underperforming. Perhaps they needed a little tactical tweak or two, a player here or there to turn around their fortunes. Oh, how I wish that was the case.
Now, what I do want to look is see where they were actually expected to finish. What should be like 11th or something? I hate to be that guy, but I think we might be in trouble.
Upon accepting the job, things just got worse for us after that as we went on the hunt for the best performing players to help us build a tactic.
Who's your top scorer? Oh good, he has 2. It's December and our top scorer has 2.
It then transpired that our new assistant manager, Taras Sinkev, had been acting as a caretaker for the last 3 matches after the previous manager was sacked, and incredibly had progressed in the cup and taken 2 draws in the league. Perhaps they should have given him the job instead of me. And it was at this point that we took the somewhat crazy decision to build a tactic solely based on the best 11 players that the club had, no matter what positions those players would be. Unless we had like 3 goalkeepers, then that's an entirely different kettle of fish. Ole Fedor on loan from Rook in Ukraine, who we thought had all the minerals to be a very good shadow striker and attacking midfielder in this system. Club captain Benjamin Bresch, who could operate on the right-hand side and obviously was the club captain at the time, despite being, well, lacking in ability, I suppose you could say. Left-sided midfielder Thiago Oliveira, who looked perfect for that role and actually had a bit of pace about him. We then had youngster and similarly excellent rhyming name Andre Moreira, who could occupy that central midfield spot in behind Ole Fedor. We decided to utilize Nicolas Schreiner's work rate and vague tackling ability, along with that positioning to occupy him as a ball-winning midfielder, as we also had Albanian youngster Venus Uka, who could occupy that DLP role for us. I realize in the tactical shot there, you can actually see them flipped around the other way. That is a mistake. One of many. At right back, we temporarily slotted in Frederick Thiel, who, you know, had reasonable pace, decent crossing, decent dribbling, okay tackling. Once again, due to a lack of any better options, we decided to go with Tun Held, the very versatile left back come DM, come central midfielder, come all over the park. What? We really did struggle in the back line, but one of the two was Giuseppe Ferretti, the Luxembourg Italian with the 6 jumping reach. Despite being 6 foot tall, he must wear concrete shoes. Potentially key player though, Semir Shutkovic, the Montenegrin, had really nice defensive attributes despite lacking a little bit in the old jumping. Yet again, you're 6'2", Semir. How is this possible? Lastly, that left Cameroonian goalkeeper Stefani Musima, who on paper looks genuinely quite good for this level. But in the actual games, as we were about to find out, he was about as useful as a cooked spaghetti snooker cue. Try saying that 6 times fast. Now I realise everything I say is fast. But we knew full well we'd have to replace a lot of these players come January to even attempt to make this system work. But that is how we ended up with this absolute monstrosity. The club did technically have a striker, we just didn't realise it until we got down to about the 15th best player in the squad. Given my stubbornness, I'll definitely be trying to carry this across multiple clubs all the way to a Champions League final, because what could possibly go wrong there? Ask me that in 10 seasons time, and maybe I'll give you a different answer. With the tactic in the oven, hoping to cook, we had no choice but to play our first game in charge against UN Sharing, and it went about as well as we could have expected. We started brightly, but then found ourselves 3-0 down by half-time despite playing well. But a red card for Kende Katko soon followed, and a late goal wasn't enough to spare our blushes. What did give us encouragement though were the underlying stats of the game. As a result, we felt like the tactic was starting to cook, and soon the results would follow. Didn't help us much in the league though, as we now slumped to 13 points from safety. The quicksand is getting deeper. Technically 12th could keep us up, but it would mean a playoff against 5th place from the 2nd tier, which I'd absolutely take at this point. I believe this database for Luxembourg isn't entirely correct, because having 5 relegation places in a 16-team league, even if one of them is for a playoff, is insanely harsh. A routine defeat to Mondeconge in the cup did have us slightly worried about the tactic, but at least it would ease our fixture congestion for the season. That's what I like to tell myself when I get knocked out of cups. Our goal at this point simply became getting through to January, where we could maybe bring in a loan or two, perhaps a free transfer here or there, to give ourselves a fighting chance. chance. Our next 2 games against Schifflange and Victoria Rossport saw us once again be at least as good, if not better, on paper than our opponents, yet still come away with 2 more defeats, making it 4 straight since we took over and leaving us wondering if wherever the morale hole the team was in would be too much to dig ourselves out of, because we now found ourselves 16 points from safety on top of that, and surely no amount of January arrivals could save us now. The first of those futile additions would be Lamine Fall, who actually been picked up by our predecessor but looked like a nice option at left back for us and slotted straight into the team. What helped is the fact it was an amateur contract with no bonuses and no clauses. Man was literally just playing for the love of the game, and I respect it, and I will exploit that. Loans and free transfers would be our bread and butter, given that we had basically 0 wage budget and no scouting range outside of Luxembourg. We'd cancelled a couple of loans to give us back a tiny bit of wage budget, one of which was Maxime Boyko, because he was earning the most money of anyone at the club, and he's a centre-back with 5 jumping reach. That's not that useful for us. It did allow us to maybe sign up to 2 whole players? It's the dream. Maybe a loan. Any players from outside Luxembourg would likely come from blind punts based on recommendations from our director of football, Norbert Fischels, which is like playing Germany roulette, since apparently it's the only country in Europe he's ever heard of. Made even weirder by the fact he had no knowledge of the country and 0 connections to it. Perhaps he enjoyed a summer holiday in Gelsenkirchen in the 90s and fell in love with the place. Nevertheless, it allowed us to pick up Moussa Fofana and Romeo Ferreira on loan from Ingolstadt and Schalke respectively. We also added Denis Rezipov from Inhulet on loan in an attempt to breathe life into our impotent strike force, hoping he could be the little blue pill of shadow strikers. Jasmine Babicic also came in on loan from Mondeconge, along with Luis Cerejo from Amora, adding some much needed bodies to at least give us a bit of depth before we decided to blow the rest of our wage budget on one signing that could change everything for us. Some have called him Dublin's answer to Andres Iniesta, but we know him as Alan Judge. The 35-year-old joined us for £160 a week after a spell at Colchester, and I was certain he was the final piece of the puzzle. In truth, I started to believe that some of the really early January joiners would really push us up the preview. I was wrong.
If I could just get us to a state where we're no longer 752... Never mind. We are indeed no longer so.
Most of these gents wouldn't join us though until the end of January, which meant that we had to get our teeth stuck into some games and maybe finally a win? Yeah, don't be silly, we don't do that here, as we lost 3-2 to a good Differdange team despite Rezipov and Fofana starting for us. At the very least, we did show that this tactic can produce some beautiful football on its day. We just needed to do it more.
Fofana. And the new guys have got to settle into the squad first. This is nice. Oh, this is beautiful. This is amazing! This is football.
This all left us 17 points from safety and 16 points away from even a sniff of the relegation playoffs. We'd lost every game in charge and now only had 12 games to pull off the greatest survival in football history. But then something genuinely amazing happened. We started to score goals and we started to win. We never knew when we were beaten, and despite a little bit of fortune in terms of the underlying numbers in some games, we just figured it was payback for the poor results we'd achieved in the first few games after we'd taken over. Before long, we'd won 3 games in a row in the league, including a fabulous free kick from Alan Judge just minutes into his debut for the club. We then followed that with a somewhat fortunate 0-0 draw away at Swift, and suddenly, out of nowhere, had taken 10 points from the last 4 games. But despite all that hard work, we were still 12 points from any kind of safety, but at the least had proven that we could win games and get points. With 8 games to go, we still believed there was a chance of the ultimate miracle coming to pass, especially as our next game would see us face fellow strugglers Racing Luxembourg at home. A win there and it really would be on. Yeah, so apparently we got a little too comfortable and just completely forgot to turn up to the most crucial game we've played thus far. Some would be tempted to call this a turning point for our survival chances, but instead, the lads got their heads down and got back to their newfound sense of pride. It wasn't just the results that were amazing, it was the performances and creativity to go with it, as we were creating XG and shots at a level we hadn't reached this season, and the belief was coming through in droves with back-to-back wins. However, while leading 2-0 away at Mondeconge going into the dying moments of the game, we proceeded to throw it all away, conceding twice to Maxime Fleury in 4 minutes, costing us 2 absolutely priceless points, and causing frustrations to go through the roof. This sadly left us 9 points from safety, despite taking 7 from our last 3 games. Teams further up the survival battle had just been taking too many points for us to be able to keep up. There was still the faintest glimmer of hope, with our next 2 games coming against Titus and Wiltz, who were both in the drop zone with us. If we could somehow snag 2 wins out of that, maybe there was still a chance of an absolute miracle. Unfortunately, it seemed that the devastating morale hit from throwing away the points in the last game was too much to bear for our squad, as we fell to a slightly unfortunate 1-0 defeat at home to Titus before the misery struck even harder for us against Wiltz, leading the game in the dying moments with our last hopes of survival on the line, only to throw it away thanks to a goal in stoppage time. This result, combined with other games elsewhere, was enough to see us relegated with 2 games to spare, now 9 points from even a playoff spot with just 6 more available. Our record in the 14 league games since we took over read 5 wins, 3 draws and 6 defeats. 18 points in 14 is the kind of form that would definitely have kept this side up over a full season, but there simply wasn't enough time left for us to actually save them. We actually took 18 points from our last 10 games in charge, so that does leave you to wonder what could have been if the team had managed to convert our tactic to results even earlier and we hadn't lost those first 4 league games in charge. Sadly, despite our turnaround in form, the board saw it fit to terminate my contract before the season had even finished, without giving us a chance to say goodbye to the players or manage the final 2 games of the season as a send-off. Out of interest, our former assistant once again took charge of the club for those final 2 games of the season and added another point to the club's tally with a draw in which Ole Fedor scored his only goal of the season despite playing 24 times in the league alone. Truly a generationally bad season from him. In truth, our time in Luxembourg had done us no favours. We hadn't been able to get any coaching courses and thus our skills remained rock bottom. Despite our heroics of clawing Marisca Mersch even back into the survival conversation, we'd not managed to gain any reputation. The biggest positive we had to cling to was that the bizarre tactical setup of asymmetric strikerless may actually have some merit to it. Whether that would remain true at our next club remained to be seen, but at least from here, the only way is onwards and upwards to our new challenge, wherever that may be. If I'm being honest, the haters said that we couldn't keep them up. And the haters were right. Great call from the haters.